Hi, everyone. My name is Shreeraj Patel, the Winnipeg Chamber of Commerce Board Chair and Vice President of Commercial Financial Services at RBC. This month, your chair in your community is coming to you in video form. May is Asian Heritage Month. The theme of the Asian Heritage Month 2021 is recognition, resilience, and resolve. It recognizes the challenges many of those of Asian descent have experienced in Canada, but also honors their contributions and their diverse stories, which are rooted in resilience and perseverance. Today's conversation is rooted and aimed to strengthen our collective roles in standing up against all forms of anti-Asian racism and discrimination. I'm so excited to have Liz Choi, our incoming board chair, chief strategy and growth officer at Education Canada Group and president at Robertson Online, and Amy Tung, founder and executive director at I Am Love Project and a member of the Chamber's Small Business Advisory Council, for a conversation today. Let's jump right into it. Thank you so much for having us, by the way, joining us today. Thank you so much. Sadly, since the pandemic, we've seen a massive spike in hate crimes towards the Asian community, both in Canada and the US. In particular, tragically, on March 16th in Atlanta, a gunman murdered 8 people, including 6 Asian women. What did those events evoke in you? Liz, do you mind starting us off?
No, not at all. It's been a very somber number of weeks for me. I would say it evoked a lot of anger. Also, feelings that I really can't describe, and I've been searching for language for it and reading up a lot about it. But I think that anger would be the best way to put it. It's brought back a lot of memories that I guess cared not to remember as I navigated my life through after moving here as a teenager, and just looking at how unjust that particular incident, and that's not the right word for it, was, and just knowing that how that was so targeted, thinking that those women were vulnerable and they would not fight back. And so just lots of feelings, but not positive ones. Sorry, I just really don't have words for it. I'm trying to make it as objective as possible. But yeah, it just made me relive a lot of my personal experiences. Obviously not the type that many, well, not the 6 Asian women victims and their families and friends, but it signified a lot of things that are just so wrong in the world that we live in.
Definitely. Amy, what about you?
Oh, wow. Well, definitely my heart goes out to all those who've been impacted, sending prayers. I haven't been able to respond much to this. Like Liz had said it clearly, it comes in shock. It comes with disbelief. It's disheartening to hear what's going on in our Asian communities around us and not knowing what to do, because we barely really talked about it. It evokes sadness, disbelief, like I said, and just the amount of hate people have accumulated over time, right? It started off with the Chinese virus, but the individuals who are impacted, they're not just Chinese people. It's the Asian community, and that encompasses Korean, Japanese, Indian, all of us. It's not just Chinese. It's scary because it has brought attention to Asians, and we don't like to speak out for attention, right? I was told kind of like chin down.
Right, because we were taught not to.
Right, like stay humble, stay in your own lane, just do you, do well, and ignore everyone else, ignore their comments. You know, we're foreigners here, we're not Canadians, and I'm sure there's microaggressions, cancel culture, and all that kind of pops up. But racism exists. It's not new, definitely not new. Let's not think it's something new. And yeah, that's what I have to say about that for now.
Yeah.
Wow,
Sorry, Raj, if I could
just
add, because just along with what Amy said, when I read the news, I just waited. Like I wasn't quick to react on social or anything like that. I just watched what unfolded the next day, the day after, and so on. And I just couldn't believe how quiet things were. Sure, there was a lot of media coverage, people were posting about it, but there just wasn't the level of rage, if you will, from the world. And I just couldn't help but wonder, and I could be putting myself out there again because we are conditioned not to challenge people's notions. What if they weren't six Asian women? What if they weren't six people of color? But what if they were white? What if they were white men, white women? Would it have been that quiet, like after the day, 2 days after, even now? Like, I just don't think there's been enough attention given to this, and that's something that I've been also trying to come to terms with.
Yeah, no, thank you both. I know for myself, it was interesting observing the media and how long it took for them to even describe this as a hate crime.
Mm-hmm.
It unfortunately took too long. So no, thank you both for your very powerful answers. So often we are assigned a single story that is supposed to represent our experiences and interactions in this world. Can you share with us your experiences as an Asian woman here in Canada? Amy, did you want to start us off?
Well, I think it would go back to we're foreigners, right? I think my parents made that clear to me and to my brothers and our family that we're foreigners. We need to stay in our own lane. We, like Liz said, like we don't speak up, right? We're always at the back of the room. We listen. We don't engage. That's how we learn. And when things do happen, I don't think we're allowed to speak up because we know that our voices won't be heard, you know? Even during the pandemic, I know early on last year in March, I was at Polo Park grabbing some stuff. This elderly man walks by me, looks at me, not in a pleasant manner, And I look back and he's like, "You brought the COVID over." I was in disbelief. I remember that we have friendly Manitoba license plate. It's just never, I didn't think, I know it was happening in the States, but I'm like, oh my goodness, this just happened to me.
Yeah.
I was in shock. And same thing, my dad was at Costco and the service was different, and just the things that he had to endure while he was shopping at Costco. It's sad, really it is.
Wow. Liz, what about you from your perspective and your experiences?
Yes, I said earlier, I've been learning a lot as well, hoping to really put some language around our lived experiences that I can greatly relate to, like with between Amy and I. Um, and I think largely because I never had to talk about it in the past because people simply didn't care to ask. And we were just conditioned to fit in. So as an Asian woman, I think there is an added layer and complexity to navigating like this society. So obviously there is that racism piece as a person of color, but then there is that added sexism component that we live with. And you know, like as again before this Asian hate crime um, topic became a thing more in media, I've been reading up a lot, generally speaking. And there was this article that I came across, which was written pre-COVID in 2018 or so. And this was specifically about Asian women and how they were seen as submissive. They were seen as service workers, cute and small and invisible. And all those words just spoke so loudly to me at that time when I first read it. So I went back to it recently just to read about it and see if that would give me a different perspective on it. And not really. But it's given me some level of validation, knowing that what I was been feeling and what's made me angry over time is no longer needs to be reduced or minimized, and knowing just that I've been on the receiving end of all these stereotypical thoughts and notions, and microaggressions, as Amy referred to earlier. It's tough being, I guess, being an Asian woman, being living in a white world in North America, and that foreigner concept. So we are considered that as forever foreigners. That's the language used in the article, and often, particularly East Asian communities are seen as that model, like immigrant communities. So I think we're conditioned to live up to that expectation and go even quieter. And it's actually a good thing if we go unnoticed, and only the good things that happen within the communities should be amplified or magnified, if you will. So now that COVID has brought a lot of this out, and all that passive aggressiveness that people may be held on to, because we, East Asian particularly, that I can relate to, communities have not caused a lot of trouble per se from their view, and this has almost given them the opportunity to outwardly express their aggression towards us. I don't know if that makes
For
sense.
sure.
Not explain itself, right? Would you say?
Pardon, Amy?
I was saying it's definitely not an even playing field.
No, not at all.
It's like, how often
It never was.
Yeah. Like, how often do you see Asians being featured in models, movies, or just most recently, the first Asian American won a Grammy. She was a producer for the film, right? And it's like, it boggled my mind. I'm like, the first?
Yeah.
I'm like in my 40s, and that's the first. How sad is that?
Yeah, and it goes back to that stereotypical notion of us being seen as service workers, right? We are here to serve, not to shine. Sure. So yeah, definitely, it's very complex.
And I think where we lack the education from schools and perhaps from our community, and not only that, like Asians, us, we need to educate ourselves, and we actually have to have the bravery to have these conversations with our kids, right? Because Alyssa and I had that conversation about racism. Like, I can't answer that. I was that person that listened to my parents. I didn't know how to speak up. And now you're asking me to be bold and to have the courage to speak on these topics. Yeah, there's so much to learn. I'm so glad that we're having this conversation today, because that brings about hope and a stronger future for our next generation.
For sure. Well, thank you both for sharing these deep, powerful experiences. I'll maybe transition to another question. Like, what do you feel is fueling these events and angers towards Asians?
Like I mentioned just before, I think this COVID pandemic has fueled it. It doesn't mean it wasn't there before, but this may perhaps the length of the time that people have been frustrated living in this lockdown. But it says, I also read an article that Vancouver has the highest number of anti-Asian incidents per capita in all of North America. So, and that was captured between 2019 and 2020. So, and Vancouver also has a high number of Asian population, right? So it doesn't surprise me given the population there, but I think recent event-wise, I do believe the pandemic has a lot to do with it. I know when I lived in BC, there was just general displeasure, if you will, there was also a division between like the Chinese community and rest that I heard, and please, I'm not speaking this with any data, but this is just anecdotally what I had heard, that just this again perception of again foreigners coming in with a lot of money, doing things their way, and not and not being considerate of Canadian culture, the way things are in Canada and so on. So I think that level of tension was on the rise. And then COVID almost acted as a platform and justified people to take action to express their frustration, their hate. Frustration would
Right.
be too light of a word.
Like you said, almost it emboldened already some existing prejudices that were. Yeah. Amy, what about you? What do you feel is kind of fueling some of this?
A loaded question. I would say accountability and division. I think as an individual in society, we don't hold ourselves accountable for much, right? We have the tendency to blame others for what's happening within our circumstances. And division, because we that's where we hold power, right? Why would you, as a president, why would you say it's a COVID or it's a Chinese virus of any sort, right? But it's creating like little pockets in society right now. I think that's the biggest challenge during COVID, is that we recognize these things. Oh, we know, oh, these people have this kind of belief. They're anti-mask and whatnot, and you're just like, oh my goodness, what's going on? I did not know, but this is like the true self, the identity of us, right? And because we always want that power and hold that piece of the pie, I am dividing and conquering, right? And that's why we never hold a really identity in Canada. And people right now, I would say, don't see us as Canadians. We get the question like, oh, where are you from? I'm from Canada. I'm born and raised in Toronto. I'm Canadian. No, but like, where are you from? Canada.
Yeah, it's an ongoing issue. I think that we all kind of have to try to kind of reconcile. And sometimes you smile about it. Sometimes you push back. I've experienced it myself. So I want to maybe end off on a bit of a growth-minded question for you both, if that's okay. How can we all as friends and allies address anti-Asian hate?
I think it's first thing is recognizing that racism does exist, right? There is an Asian culture, and we're not all alike. We're from different pockets of Asia. And holding yourself accountable, being open to questions and being curious enough to ask the right questions. Example was, where are you from? I'm Canadian, and you still think that's not an answer. But I think that's the education part that I was talking about, where we need to be educated to have those conversations with our children, so they know how to handle it, right? I don't know, Liz, what do you think?
I agree. I also firmly believe that accountability is key. And if we have friends and allies who happen to be in the higher order of this racism structure, system, if you will, I would really want them to start calling wrong things out, and don't hide behind, like, I'm not one of them thinking. Like, I'm an exception because my best friend is from China, or I'm married to an Asian person, or even if you're not one of those attackers or oppressors, you have a role to play, to make a positive impact, because still we live in that society where there's just more credit given if it's a white person talking about things. And I think like Raj and I have a lot of these conversations offline, and I do with my other friends who are people of color. And whenever we are honestly having these conversations, there is that side of us that always worry of being misunderstood, or being accused of us using our race card when we've been conditioned to not do that throughout our lives. So just that respect that we have different lived experiences, and do ask questions. They don't always have to be the right ones, but just I think that that genuine place of wanting to understand, when that's established, then we will start hurting less. And then we'll start to feel like we truly belong. Because I think right now, even for maybe I can't speak for both of you, but even for myself, largely, I feel like I'm included in many places that I'm part of, my work and others. But do I feel that I belong completely? I don't think I'm there yet. So if our allies and friends could make those who are not there yet feel like they belong where you belong, or vice versa, then I think that's the end game, and we have a long way to go.
Well, with that, Amy, Liz, you have my deep gratitude. Thank you so much for being open to sharing your voices and your stories about your own lived experiences. So again, on behalf of the Winnipeg Chamber, thank you so much for taking the time to join me in powering this amazing conversation. So thank you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for having the conversation.